Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined again by Niall Stanage.
Great to see you on a Friday morning, Amber. How are you?
2 in a row.
Exactly. It's our lucky 2 weeks at this stage.
That's right. And the audience is lucky for having us here. That's how I feel.
Have you had a good week?
I have. How about you?
It has been fine and dandy, thank you. It's
Wonderful.
all been good.
So Any good weekend plans?
I am going to rest up. I'm meeting some friends for brunch tomorrow morning. Other than that, I'm going to take it easy. What about yourself?
Wonderful. Yeah, easy weekend for me too. Just hanging out with my cats.
Well, that sounds good. Coming up this morning on Rising, FBI Director Dan Bongino feuding with Republican Representative Thomas Massie after Massie alleged the Bureau is retaliating against whistleblowers connected to January the 6th.
Plus, conservatives are battling it out over H-1B visas, the concerns over their abuse.
And Liberals and Conservatives agree on at least one thing after a newly released app promises to use AI to allow you to chat with deceased relatives and friends.
Spooky. But first, fallout from the release of tens of thousands of emails from the Epstein estate. After Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released 3 emails from Epstein on Wednesday that specifically referenced President Trump, Republicans responded by dumping 20,000 more, some with references to Democratic figures like Bill and Hillary Clinton.
While the news coverage yesterday was dominated by the released files, Fox News came under fire for alleged underreporting of the matter. Liberal radio host Stephanie Miller confronted Sean Hannity on Hannity's own show yesterday about the lack of coverage after he asked about a gag photo of her kissing the shoes of Liberal firebrand Jasmine Crockett. Take a look.
I thought it was funny, but if it was anybody else, I probably wouldn't think it was as funny. So, well done.
Thank you for being the only one on the right that gets the joke. Sean, it was a joke. And then, you know, the funniest thing about this story is Trump's all over the Epstein files. And I wonder if they're going to release that after the big bombshell. I didn't see anything about that on Fox News today. Yeah, okay, so let's release them. Let's release those files. Is this what passes for news? Is this what passes for news on Fox News?
Hannity went on to ask Miller about Biden's mental decline, but Miller once again changed the subject. Take a listen to that.
When did you notice Joe Biden's cognitive decline? And don't change the subject and deflect. When did you really notice it?
Well, I think it was through all of the times that Donald Trump has fallen asleep in public and talked about, you know, magnets getting wet in the last few, you know,
gosh.
My mom had dementia, so I recognize it. You know what else is great about Biden's decline is that Trump is all over the Epstein files, and I'm wondering if they're going to release those. Are you covering that tonight?
As new bombshell revelations continue to come to light from those emails, this may be just the beginning of a much larger scandal to hit Washington. The House is gearing up for a vote on a bill to compel the DOJ to release all of their files related to Epstein.
The petition to force a vote received its final signature required last weekend after Representative Adelita Grijalva was sworn in. President Trump reportedly spent the final hours before she signed the petition lobbying Republicans who had signed to remove their names. Typically, a vote will be held within 8 to 10 legislative days after the final member has signed the discharge position, which would put the vote in early December. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has actually moved up the timeline to next week before Congress breaks for the Thanksgiving holiday.
Despite the expedited timeline, the bill is unlikely to be enacted in full, as it needs 60 votes to pass the Senate, and then it would require the President's signature. It will, however, force House Republicans to vote on the files. That's a move they were hoping to avoid, as it might put some in a politically difficult position. Lot to talk about there, Amber. I think, first of all, it's interesting to me that there is quite a lot of reporting now suggesting a quite high number of Republicans might vote for this measure in the House to release all the Epstein files. And we've seen the 3 joining with Massie, which is Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene. But there's some suggestion that a lot more could vote for this. To me, that firstly, I think they should vote for it. But secondly, it does speak to, I think, a greater acceptance that it would just be in everyone's interest and in the public interest to have these files released.
Well, and a lot of these Republicans were talking publicly when Biden was in office about wanting to release the Epstein files. So if you turn around and you vote against this release, then you're politically damaging yourself. I mean, it would be completely idiotic not to do so, even if Trump is telling you that he doesn't want these out. I think that in this case, actually, Trump's base has been willing to push back against him for his perceived efforts to cover up the full release of all of the documentation, and is much more preferential to the Republicans who have been fighting for that discharge petition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, we were talking about this with myself and Robbie, were talking about it yesterday. One of the most perplexing and I think damaging elements of Trump's approach has been these seemingly ostentatious efforts to stop the discharge petition. The most prominent, I think, being Boebert being summoned to the White House, brought into the Situation Room with Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and others to try to dissuade her from keeping her name on that petition. To her credit, she didn't backslide from that, nor did Green, nor did Mace, despite Trump's best efforts. But these do call into question what exactly is going on here when he seems so adamant about trying to press against the release of the files.
Yeah, and I'm starting to wonder, based on the selective releases we've had that have mentioned Trump, they haven't been all that damaging. I mean, the one that was coming out this week said that Trump knew about the girls, but then told Ghislaine Maxwell to stop. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not a smoking gun by any means from the Democrats. So I think perhaps that maybe there's a high-profile friend of his that might be involved, unless there is, potentially some other smoking gun about Trump behind this firewall that we've had. But so far, what has been released hasn't been, I think, what most people would say as evidence that he was involved in any way.
Well, I don't think it's clearly not evidence that he engaged in criminal activity. I think the problem for him is, and I take a dimmer view of the he knew about the girls email, because the point is that Trump's position has been kind of confusing in a way. On the one hand, whether Epstein was removed as a member of Mar-a-Lago because of creepy behavior, but at the same time, Trump's representative saying he wasn't aware of Epstein's activities, right? So there's an inherent contradiction in that. I think anything that goes to broad knowledge of Epstein's activities is damaging for Trump. We discussed that yesterday. But to your point about, could there be a friend of his or whatever, one of the obvious problems of not having the files is that it just, by its very nature, creates conjecture about what could be in there, and sensationalist views or exculpatory views or whatever. People are all discussing what might be there, whereas you could just put it out and resolve that issue.
Yeah, and you're right about his contradictory statements, because he has said repeatedly that he didn't know anything about it. But then Virginia Giuffre's lawyer said that he was actually someone who had volunteered to come speak to him when they were going through the process of going after Jeffrey Epstein in the first place. And then she has said that he wasn't involved in any of it, but also didn't say that he didn't know about it. So I do think that there is a contradiction there, and it's sort of like him saying that the average gas price is $2.50 a gallon, but it's like $3.07. It's like,
yeah, right.
What are we doing here?
Yeah, briefly, because I know we're almost out of time. That email that I'm sure you read as well, where Epstein was talking about Trump as the dog that didn't bark and that he hadn't been mentioned, and then Ghislaine Maxwell said, I've been thinking about that as well. What do you think? I couldn't actually get what they were implying. Was the implication that Trump was cooperating with law enforcement against Epstein?
That would seem the most likely explanation based on what Giuffre's lawyer said, because they kind of gave the impression that he was talking to them about what he knew in order to help her case,
right? Which
would imply that he was actually working with law enforcement. And I've seen that speculated before, that he was perhaps some kind of informant.
Yeah, but interesting one.
Coming up, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino is blasting allegations that the Bureau is targeting whistleblowers in its investigation of the January 6th pipe bomb incident. We'll be right back.